This week's inauguration of retired military general Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as President of the Republic. Journalist Mark Lavie recently authored the book, The Broken Spring, after returning from a lengthy assignment in Cairo, and he discussed al-Sisi's intentions with IBA's Laura Cornfield.
The main course of action has to be to try to correct Egypt's economy. It's a total mess. It has caused many of the tensions and many of the problems that Egypt is facing today. That'll be his main course of action. His main course of public action, on the other hand, might be to continue his crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood. That's going to be a cover for the economic steps he has to take. These steps include reforming subsidies in Egypt. I know it sounds boring, but this is where we are. Subsidies amount to the 90% level of the budget deficit in Egypt. They take up a third of the budget altogether, and it just distorts everything completely. Many people live on $100 a month or $50 a month, and the subsidies make it possible, but they also perpetuate this poverty. And the poverty is what's causing trouble in Egypt. The instability is keeping foreign investors away, it's keeping tourists away. That's his main problem, and that should be and will be his main course of action.
Mark, street protests against the al-Sisi inauguration seem to have faded out in recent days. Is the Muslim Brotherhood battered and weak due to the mass arrests and the death sentences handed out by the government?
The Muslim Brotherhood has been weakened mostly by the actions of its former president, Mohammed Morsi, who was deposed by al-Sisi. He was simply a bad president. He lost the support and the faith of his people, and millions of them turned out in the streets to pitch him out. The Muslim Brotherhood is a fraction of what it was then. It was, at that time, the most powerful political movement in Egypt. It still is to some extent, but the crackdown, of course, has kept the Muslim Brotherhood people off the streets to some extent. The arrests, of course, have as well. The death sentences against hundreds of Muslim Brotherhood supporters and leaders has had its effect as well. I don't expect those death sentences to be carried out, but they have certainly repressed the Brotherhood and pushed it back underground, but don't think it's gone. It's far from gone.
Al-Sisi made a comment in his speech saying that the Palestinian issue is still atop the Middle East agenda, but practically speaking, is he expected to be involved in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
I don't think so. I think every Arab leader has to say that and then move on to the real news. Clearly, the things we talked about before, the economic issues, the Muslim Brotherhood, reintegrating people into the Egyptian society who've been marginalized over the years. These are the main things. And of course, every now and again, you have to make a pronunciation of some sort about Israel and about the Palestinians, but he's not going to be involved in Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations the way that President Mubarak was, for example. I don't expect to see a lot of visits in each direction.
How committed, seriously committed, is al-Sisi to his anti-Israel extremist campaign in Sinai and along his border with Gaza?
Well, he's committed to it, but not because they're anti-Israel. They're anti-Egypt. We're talking about a jihadi extremists, some linked to or at least inspired by al-Qaeda, who want to overthrow his government first and foremost. And of course, they also threaten Israel. Now, here is something where I think we can look to our benefit. Al-Sisi was the person who led the negotiations with Israel to increase the Egyptian army's presence in Sinai in order to carry out this campaign. Now, we haven't heard about these negotiations because neither country has an interest in making them public. But al-Sisi is probably Israel's closest friend in Cairo now, and this is likely to be presented by the fact that he won't do anything against Israel, and what he does for Israel, he'll be doing for himself as well, and quietly.
One last quick question. Washington originally condemned the al-Sisi military coup against Morsi and his Islamic Brotherhood. Do you expect al-Sisi to bridge the gaps with the Obama administration and receive the much-needed reserves?
It's really more up to the United States than up to al-Sisi. The United States made a grave error in cutting military aid to Egypt at a time when the military was getting back into power. So the Egyptians have turned to other forces like Qatar, like Saudi Arabia, and also Russia. So it's really up to the United States to correct its policy and the West to correct its policy and to understand that al-Sisi is the president of Egypt. He's been elected, okay, maybe a sham election. He's the leader, he's the government, and he's the person they'll have to deal with.
Mark Lavie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.